Hi, welcome back to our channel, Humans of Healthcare. Welcome back. This episode is with Danny Mobley, myself, and Danielle Cobo, who is a best-selling author, transformational speaker, and a podcast host herself. We dive into the effects of burnout on healthcare workers, nurses, and honestly, just anyone who has a career themselves. And we dive into how to be a mother and how to work at the same time and how generation by generation social media has changed us. There's just so much in this episode that you'll want to see. So make sure and like and subscribe and follow our socials below in the description. And yeah, let's get into it. I know you talk about burnout
Mhm.
quite a bit. And I kind of just wanted to get your perspective on especially healthcare workers because it's a huge problem in healthcare right now, burnout. And like, what is some advice that you would give, especially people my age of who have just started, how to
Mhm.
not get to that burnout point?
So I would say it's important to set boundaries. So being able to set a boundary and saying, first identify what your boundaries are. And a lot of times when we're new in our career, we want to say yes. We want to say yes all the time because we don't want anything that's going to compromise our career. And there's ways that you can say yes while also setting boundaries. So if somebody is saying, can you take on an extra project, it could look like, yes, I absolutely want to support with that extra project. I have something that's time sensitive right now. Can I, go ahead and start that next week? Or if it's time sensitive as well, can we adjust the current timeline with what I'm working on right now? Or maybe I can recommend somebody else who can help.
Right.
So I believe it's really important to set boundaries but you can still always lead with yes. I would also say that it's really important to identify like what is important to you and ensure that you're prioritizing it as well. So a lot of times we get so focused in on our career, but really I always say take care of you, then take care of your family, then take care of your business
Right.
in
I
that
love,
order.
yeah, that's awesome. I love that for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Danielle, I ran onto something last week that was a CEO we'd interviewed like 6 weeks ago,
Mhm.
and he was kind of frightened. I mean, he was great, transparent, and I really
Mhm.
appreciate the vulnerability that he sort of showed. I think that's big
Mhm.
in and of itself. But he's like, I thought, everybody was going to come out of the woodwork and pounce. But then what he realized is he really had some tough discussions with people because the affirmation he got
Mhm.
was something that build his confidence.
Mhm.
And so he's like, I needed to have some tough conversations with some people that were around me, and I was able to do that because I felt that confidence. He'd kind of gotten over that hump of something that was kind of scary for him,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they've had great success at his hospital since. But
Mhm.
he talked about a couple of things. He said energy and saying yes, like you said. He's at that point to where passion and energy
Mhm.
have helped him build confidence. Is that something that
Mhm.
you kind of think goes hand in hand?
Yeah, I believe that it's important to be passionate about what you're doing and to also recognize there's been times in my situation, in my life, and in my career where I've noticed that the energy isn't there and the passion isn't there.
Yeah.
And it's important to first, in those circumstances, not just continue to push through because that's when the burnout happens. It's
Right.
important to take a step back, reflect on why it's not there, and then work towards rebuilding it. And sometimes that means taking a pause, and that pause is okay. I've had to do that several times throughout my career because the times that I have been like, well, I'm I may not have the passion, but I'm going to continue to show up and just put one foot forward and fake it till I make it, then it doesn't really bring the right energy that's going to support me or the people around me. It's better to take a pause and work on your what's going on internally, and refine that spark that you have so that you can bring that energy to the workplace.
What kind of stuff, just for the people that don't know, Danielle, have you had to go through to help you? How did you figure this stuff out?
I have experienced burnout multiple times in my career. The I would say the most recent time that I experienced burnout, I was so focused in on, so I would say my upbringing I was very much so. I had a beautiful and a very broken relationship with my mom. My mom was somebody who I admired and I inspired to be. And she was somebody who was a single mom who went to school full time, who was working full time. And I saw her go from absolutely nothing to rising the corporate ladder in the pharmaceutical industry, being a region manager in the 1990s. My mom and I also had a very broken relationship because my mom suffered from bipolar disorder and she was very manipulative. She actually took me from my father when I was 2.5 years old. So I didn't meet my dad till I was 15. And many of my upbringing was this desire to make my own money, to have freedom from my mom and her manipulation. And so I've been very money focused. I've been very focused on having a successful career so that I can make the decisions that I want for my life and not feel tied to anybody else. And a lot of what I've noticed through this journey is that sometimes I get so focused in on the goal that I get so focused on the destination that I lose sight in some of the accomplishments along the way, or why am I pursuing this particular goal? And sometimes I've been so focused on getting to a particular destination, but while I've been on that path, maybe life circumstances have changed. And maybe that destination isn't necessarily the destination that I want to get to anymore. I believe that for many years, I had a very successful career and I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder. But when I had kids, I realized that sometimes it's not a never, it's just a not right now for this phase of life that I'm in. And it's taking a step back and looking at our life is going to change several times throughout the year and throughout the years overall, and focusing in on what's important to you right now in this given moment and reevaluating that consistently.
Yeah, so I'm curious along those lines. How do you have kids, in a high powered like job, and where do you put those healthy boundaries? Or, I mean, when you talk about creating them for yourself, like it sounds like, okay, look, create a boundary, but like it's hard. I mean,
Mhm.
you're in the mix, and like I look at Sam and I'm thinking, she's got all these ambitions, right? And like then kids are going to completely throw everything out of whack, and it's a beautiful thing. Like enjoy the journey, but God, like
Mhm.
how can you do both and make sure you don't, I don't know, burn out, right? If
Yeah.
you're using that word, but
Yeah.
golly.
I mean, I think that once you become a parent, you become very intentional about your time. Before I had kids, I would look at people and say, oh, there's no way. I don't know how you can do this job with kids. I feel like I'm always working all the time. Well, before I had kids, I would work nights because I had nothing that would really be more of a priority. And what I've learned after having kids is I'm very intentional with my time, very strategic with my time. And when I'm saying yes to something, I'm saying no to something else.
Right.
So if I'm going to be saying yes to something and it's going to be taking away time from my kids, it better be extremely important.
Mhm.
And I was talking with somebody the other day and they were talking about how they were spending their weekends at birthday parties. My kids are 6 years old, I have twins. And I was like, you know what? I work so hard during the week that I'd love to go to all these birthday parties, but that is my time with my kids. And I'm going to say no to those because I'm saying yes to my kids. And
Right.
it's okay. I don't need to. My mom of the year is what's most important for my kids me being mom of the year to them, not everybody else's
Right.
Yeah.
kids. So I think that, yeah, you just become very intentional with your time. You learn to say no to things that you don't want because you're saying yes to other. And then also sometimes you take pauses for the phase of life that you're in. I've recently taken a pause and I've said, you know what? Although I had a very successful career and I was traveling all the time, it was a little bit easier when they were younger. We had a support system, we had a full-time nanny, but I'm noticing as they're getting a little bit older, they're in kindergarten, first grade, they have homework now and they need me very present for that homework. So I'm okay saying no to some of the higher up roles that require more travel because I'm saying yes to my kids right now for this phase of life that I'm in, knowing that I can always pursue other goals eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, So you mentioned that like your mom was, had some issues with work-life balance. How do you think that taught you or, molded you into the mom you are today?
Ooh. So my mom, I remember my mom was, and I believe that we give more grace to our parents when we become a parent. Because for many years, I was very frustrated with my mom. I'm like, you travel all the time. She traveled 50, 60% of the year. And because she was in a regional sales manager position or she was in a training and development role. And I remember being like, I rather live in a smaller, as a kid, I rather live in a smaller house and us have less money for you to be present more than to you be on the road. But I also understand now being in her role, it's really hard when you have grown such a successful career to put a pause on that. But I also believe that growing up in that upbringing, I've now said, I don't want my kids to experience that same feeling of missing, like their mom wasn't there, that I did. So it's been, you always try to do better than your parents, but I also feel like I also give my mom a lot more grace because she really, being a single mom, tried everything she can to provide a good family, good upbringing for me, which she did. I was
Right.
able to go the first one to go straight to college. I was able to build a successful career. And now I get to change the circumstances a little bit and be more present with my kids
Right.
while still building a career. I'm just choosing not to take on certain roles
Mhm.
because of this phase.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious about this too. Like, and Sam is here with me, so it's a little bit awkward. But like, I remember what I had to go through to pull out of, I guess the being poor, and when I say getting over being poor, like Hemingway wrote about that, like it was a sickness, right? And so I got over being poor, but I had to fight like hell in order to get through it. And when I think about the things that I had to go through, they were all experiences that I had to have in order to be where I'm at today. I'm actually genuinely conflicted on how to help others. My daughter, I've got two stepsons now. How do we help them? And they're not going to go through the same thing I went through. I can already tell you, it's just like they've got a lot more than I ever had. So how can we give them the good lessons without, also damaging them? I mean, or helping them take advantage of what we built. I mean, it's really kind of conflicting to me.
I think that's hard
Yeah.
because right now, I mean, I see my kids and sometimes it appears as though they're ungrateful at times because they complain about things where I'm going, you have no idea how good you have it. I did not have these toys. My bed
Yeah.
was we lived in a single one bedroom apartment and my bed was in the living room when I was growing up and
Yeah.
I all my clothes for school shopping was on layaway.
Yeah.
And so it's really
Hilarious.
hard because I look at my kids and I'm like, you seem so ungrateful. But then at I also get to be understanding that they're basing their decisions and their outlook on things based off of their perspective and they've been given a lot more than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in how we could teach our kids about hardship is getting them very involved in volunteer work, showing them what life is like outside of what we live in,
Right.
and also to share our stories. I talk to my kids about I didn't have these types of things growing up. And, mommy and daddy work really hard so that we can provide you these experiences. And when they go through hardship, just to be there for them as much as we can, knowing that maybe their hardship may be a little bit easier than we went through, but it still doesn't change the emotions of what we go when we go through something that's hard.
Yeah. Do you think Gen Zers are going to have a different experience no matter what the hardships are? Is there just like inherently something different between the generations that you've seen? And like what are your thoughts on the differences between like I'm a Gen Xer, I was between the boomer and I raised a Gen Zer, right? And so it's like how do we understand them and sort of help guide them, like you said, be understanding of what you just described. Maybe they don't have to go through this stuff, right? Like maybe that's part of the answer is they don't have to anymore.
I believe that we they do need to go through their own experiences. Sometimes the best learning lessons that we have are from the experiences that we go through. And it's up to us as parents to be there for them when they do go through those hardships. I mean, they're going to go through, no matter what, they're going to go through job losses, they're going to go through breakups, they're going to go through financial hardships, they're going to go through the experience of like trying to make it out on their own. And we just get to be there to listen, to acknowledge their hardships, to support them, and to provide the guidance that we can. But they're going to, I think each generation always complains about the next generation. Oh, they're lazy, or, oh, they don't know how good they have it. But every generation complains about the next generation. And yeah, you know what? Maybe the Gen Zers have a lot more. We've provided them with a lot, but they also have their own hardships that we didn't experience. Social media being one of them. I can't imagine being a high schooler right now with social media, and everything that we do is documented on social media and that follows with them. It's one of the reasons why I don't anymore post pictures of my kids on social media, because they can post pictures when they're old enough to choose when they want their pictures to be up, not me doing it for them. And or they're going to be, I can't imagine what it's like to start a career during COVID and the uncertainty of a pandemic. Those are experiences that we didn't. I started my career during the 2008 market crash. So as I was entering the workforce, it was good for about 2 years, and then everybody lost their jobs.
Yeah.
So every generation is going to go through their own challenges and hardships, and we may be able to relate to some of them, and we may not be able to relate to some of them, and they're just different.
Yeah. It's like relative. Yeah. 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 So I think, when I think about grit and, what just, I also have another word for it, like the resilience to get through, and I tend to think of it in business terms, but it feels like there's a lot of crossover between the grit you need to have in life and the grit you need to have in business. Sam's like moving into the business world. She's starting to get, I don't know, a taste of what it's like to be a part of a corporation and stuff like that. Is there any like correlation there that you like to, sort of let people know about? Anything that you talk about in your books that you want to sort of get out to the masses here?
Yeah. So in my book, Unstoppable Grit, I talk about, Angela Duckworth did a TED Talk, and she talked about grit is passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. And I absolutely agree with her findings on what grit is. I believe that one of the reasons why people have such a hard time with grit is because we have defined what success looks like based off of what social media has shown us success looks like, or what the movies have shown us what success looks like. And so when I am taking readers through the book, I'm first helping them understand what shaped their belief system on what success is. And I break it down, even down to the movies and social media. And then I help them through a series of exercises, help them define what success is to them, because it is very different for different stages and phases of life that we're in. And so in order to have grit, you've got to be able to understand what your passion is, and knowing that what your passion is today may be very different than it was 2 years ago, which will probably be different 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And so, and then also, how do you bounce back when challenges occur or uncertainties occur? And I take a lot of readers through those exercises as well.
Oh, good. Right. No, that's great. Sam's, got stuff that she has to cope with. I've got stuff that I have to cope with. Mine's like morning. I wake up in the morning and I feel sometimes like not myself. Right. And then I go into a routine, but my goal is to get energy to give to others. So that's the goal. And I feel disappointed if I can't get to that point right then. And it sort of compounds the way I woke up feeling. I don't know if it's depression. I have seasonal stuff that I go through, but it's harder those days, a lot harder, frankly, to get going. But I don't feel like I can just kind of roll out and say, oh, I feel like crap this morning. Like, I don't know if the world will accept that. So you do what you got to do. I think that's exactly, my way of doing it. I don't know about Sam, what your coping mechanism is, but mine's just power through.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to get through the day.
Yeah.
But I saw in one of your keynote speeches, Danielle, to kind of bounce off of that, is like you said, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you do is very important. So I kind of wanted to get your opinion on What do you do first thing in the morning, or what do you recommend people do?
Yeah, the first hour of your day sets the intention of your day. And a lot of times, what we do as a society is we wake up and we go straight to our phone. And I did it this morning. And so, even though I teach on this, I did it this morning and I recognized immediately how it was affecting my day. I looked at an email and I had received an email from somebody that they chose to go a different direction on something. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I was like, you know what? That just started my day
Right.
versus using the first hour of the day to get my kids ready, grab a cup of coffee, kind of get myself in the right mindset for the day so that when I do receive maybe news that isn't what I necessarily wanted, I'm at least coming from a good mindset right from the beginning. But a lot of people, the first thing they do is they look at their emails and then they go, oh, I've got to do this today. I got to do that today. And they start running through the list of all the things that they got to do. And they're creating overwhelm right from the beginning of their day.
Right.
So that's why I say the first hour of your day sets the intention of your day. I also say the last hour of your day sets the intention of your day as well. So I will be very cognizant and conscious of not having my phone around me the first hour and the last hour of my day.
Great. That's easy enough, right? Sounds easy. I mean, sounds easy.
Yeah.
It's
Not
not.
easy for me. No.
Simple, but not easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. And we're also like we're getting into the social media thing too. It's been about a year, like I said, and Sam's very new to it. We're trying to, I don't know, I think we want to make the world better, at the core of the reason.
Mhm.
And it makes sense what you said. Just get into the right frame of mind, like mine's gratitude. That's what I try to capture before I go. But yeah, I looked at my phone today too. And not that it was bad, it's just like news of the world will throw you out of whack.
It
Yeah.
will. It
Yeah.
definitely will. And I talk about in the book, there's a chapter in the book where I break down how social media affects our beliefs and how we show up in the world. And I talk about taking the remote control of your social media and really being able to take control of the algorithms. I notice when I am getting into a comparison mode because I'm seeing people and them accomplishing certain goals on social media and then I start to compare myself to them, I have to be very mindful of going, wait a minute, like, is this healthy for me? And a lot of times with social media, especially like Instagram, they're either it's people showing all their successes or it's people trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, a lot of times when I start to see myself spiraling into, oh, in order for my house to look a certain way, I need to be styling it this way. And this is in latest fashion trends. And this is how you contour, whatever it is. But I start to unfollow certain profiles or mute certain profiles. And then I go to certain profiles that are very like motivational speeches or words of encouragement. And I'll start to add those as favorites so that I'm taking control of the algorithms and the news feeds of what I see in my social media.
Yeah. Nice. Just take command of.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's a good point too. I think I came from a sales background, and the thing that I can tell you from that corporate world and trying to push product, if you will, or features and benefits is, like people are pretty smart and they're going to see through that, right? And if you're not genuine, like there's nothing to sell. We do that on purpose. Like there's nothing to sell here. We just want to tell stories, but people sniff it out pretty quick. And I'm the worst person to sell to. I'm absolutely the worst person. But there's a number of people out there trying to get stuff and they're savvy. They really are. They've got these great ways of getting to you, and that is their intention, but it's like you said, take control, take command. That feels really like, and you do have it. You have all the control, like just don't let it in,
Mhm.
Yeah. Great, great. That's awesome. So, like, who do you admire in life when you think about people that inspire you? Like, who comes to mind right off the top?
So I first and foremost, I am a believer. So God
Yeah,
is at the core of everything that I follow. So I try to live by the way that He has designed us to live.
yeah.
So that would be first and foremost. When I think about people I admire, there's no one that really comes to mind
Interesting.
but I believe the reason is because when I start to think of who I admire, I start to almost try to live their life versus living my own life and and being happy with me.
Interesting. I love that. That's a great answer. And I think you're right. Jesus is the one you like. I watched The Chosen for the first time recently. It
Hmm.
was great. And like I found myself thinking, like after watching the show, like, why can't I just try to do that?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, it makes
Yeah.
sense. Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
I found admiration is kind of a slippery slope as well. And it's not an
Hmm.
easy question. It really isn't. I didn't think about that until you said it. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely been times where I'd be like, oh, I admire this person because of this. But then
Yeah.
I believe when we start to put admirations on other people, we lose sight on the beauty within us and how we were designed and appreciating the unique characteristics and qualities that we bring to the world. And
Yeah.
so I just gonna say I admire God and what He's created me to be, and that's how I get to live.
Yeah. Oh, good
So
answer. Yeah.
yeah, I love.
So for young folks that are kind of coming into the world, it's like Sam's 23. I got a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and you've said some things on here that I think are really just sort of simple but not easy, but they're really nice truths that if you follow those, it's a good start. But like I think the creating of goals, I talk about this every once in a while. I use this quote. I love it. It's Robert Brault. He says, "We're kept from our goals not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." And
Hmm.
it's like, talking to Sam, she probably gets worn out by it. But I always talk, what do you want? What do you want? What goals? What are you going after? And sometimes she just doesn't know, right? And I'm around a lot of younger folks that just don't know, and I find it scary. But they're just navigating. So I think they don't know what their options are at this point. And so I find myself having to back off a little bit from that question, frankly. But I mean, it's okay, right? It's okay just to kind of figure it out as you figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's interesting because I think back to when I was in college and people always ask, what's your major? What do you want to do? We ask this younger generation, what do you want to do? And the reality is they may not know because they haven't been exposed to
Yeah.
what's out there and what the options are out there. I changed my major 5 times when I was in college, which is one of the reasons why I ended up having a major and a minor,
Yeah.
because I changed it so much because I didn't know. And I believe that that's okay because I was navigating through and exploring different options that are out there. Maybe I wanted to be a journalist, and then I started taking journalism classes. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this. And then I started taking advertising classes, and I started taking psychology classes, and all of them have served me well in my career. But it's, our goals that we may have, we may not know them
Yeah.
just because of life that we're in right now, or maybe our goals are shifting, or maybe we're still discovering who we are and what we want. So yes,
Yeah.
I believe it's important to have goals, but to not harp too much if we don't have goals, because that's an opportunity for self-reflection and to take a pause and figure out really what we're passionate about.
Yeah. And it's another challenge is out there, like, is money.
Mhm.
And we don't talk a lot about it. I don't. I was raised conservatively, right? My mom would slap me, and it's like so. But money's a topic of conversation. I think that young folks are curious about.
Mhm.
Like, how do you get it, and like, what are you supposed to do? And we had a women in leadership group on like 2 weeks ago, and I asked this question, and they're not making what they think they should make.
Mhm.
They're still from it's true, like there's a struggle out there for them to get what they deserve
Mhm.
compared to men, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on how do you position yourself in this world to get what you deserve and ask for it? It feels like it's a hard thing to do, but how does a woman, can you ask for what you think you deserve?
I think the first thing is you got to be able to ask for it.
Yeah.
So a lot of
Right.
times when people are pursuing a particular position, they won't negotiate their compensation package. And if that's the first step is negotiating your compensation package, just because somebody's offered it, and it's hard because you get offered a job and the job market's tough. And so you get offered a job, you're like so happy to get the job, but you don't want to rock the boat. But that is the time when you want to negotiate your compensation package. And the worst that they can say is, no, we can't do that, but you should at least try. And when it comes to, and then asking for raises as time progresses, but it's not just a matter of asking for a raise. It's, hey, here's what I have done and contributed to the organization and the value that I bring that I believe warrants this particular raise. So it's showing how you have invested in your personal and professional development, how you've added value to the organization that supports you asking for the raise.
Right.
Yeah. I'd heard a stat somewhere, Danielle, that it was like 3% of people in the workforce actually read and do their own sort of self training outside of the workplace. Like 3%, watch podcasts and try to just improve, unless they're, I mean, people will do it if they're told to by their work, apparently,
Mhm.
but that's a small percentage that actually go out and try to improve themselves outside of work. Have you seen anything like that? Does that ring true to you from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with
Mm.
organizations where they haven't had any leadership development programs within the
Yeah.
organization. And
Yeah.
when I've met with some of these individuals and we started, I would build out and facilitate a leadership development program for them. It was like they had been exposed to this stuff for the first time. And I'm going, wow,
Yeah.
that was an eye-opening experience for me because I have always invested in professional development. I've had a mentor since I was 23 years old when I
Yeah.
first entered the job market. And I've always read leadership development books and sales books
Yeah.
and personal development books. And there's so many resources that are out there. I believe that sometimes, when it comes to our career, 10% of it is on our manager, 90% of it is on us. Our manager can show us the way by saying, hey, here's a career development plan. If you want to pursue a particular promotion or a particular role, this is the path to get you there. But it's ultimately up to us to do the work to get there. And so whether it's reading books, whether it's listening to podcasts, we can enroll in our own training programs, get our own certifications. LinkedIn Learning offers tons of training programs that are on LinkedIn Learning. There's so
Yes.
many resources out there, but it is beneficial when you have some guidance and some guidance on where you can get those resources.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a whole world is available if you want,
Mhm.
if you want to go look for it. And I was surprised by that. I just naturally watch stuff and try to improve and figure out what's going on, but apparently a lot of people don't. And
Mhm.
and I think that's kind of going back to the question is when it comes to asking for what you think you deserve is, what are you doing? Like personal accountability is a big part of that. What are you doing to improve yourself? And I think if you are doing those things, to me, it's easier to talk about. Like I'd like to talk about things that I know. And if you go talk to a manager or an executive somewhere, frankly, I want to hear it as an executive. I want to hear the cool stuff you're doing. And I want you to ask me. There's so many times people just sit in the cut and they don't ask anything. They just stay there quiet. And to me, it's like that's courage that I think you're going to need to lead, frankly. And then the confidence to kind of come out and say something that about yourself for yourself. But if I'm Sam, I'm looking like that's not easy. I don't know where to get the word. So it's not so much about attitude and behavior. Sometimes it's like technique, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's you can find technique out there. You can find training on technique. You can find the words and the scripts and the not so much scripts, but ways to genuinely convey, that you're confident and you know what you're doing. You're ready for the next step. So anyway, I think there's like you said a lot. Just ask. Go out and ask and see what happens. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first step is always asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Sam, is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I saw that you are married to a person in the military.
Mhm.
And I've always thought that was really interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are in your position. And so I kind of wanted to get your input or experiences of when he's gone, you have the kids. And how do you deal with him being gone working, having the kids, and trying to find that balance of being a mom, which is a full time job, and then also having a job?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because in 2019, our twins were between the ages of 1.5 and 2.5 years old. And I was leading a team for a Fortune 500 organization across 5 states. So I traveled every week by plane. I had overnights. And my husband was deployed for an entire year. He was serving a deployment in Iraq. And it was a very difficult year. It took a lot of again, setting some boundaries on what I was saying yes to and what I was saying no to. But I also had a really incredible support system. I had a full time nanny. I had a mother in law that would stay the nights on the nights that I would travel. And, but I believe that giving yourself some grace. I had this idea, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in such great shape when my husband's gone. I bought a Peloton and I probably rode it like 25 times that year. I needed sleep more than anything. So, really listening to what your body needs most is important. But yeah, it was a difficult year. Being a military spouse comes with its own challenges. You try to focus. I tried not to focus on what was I try to focus on what was in my control, not what was out of my control. But
Right.
when you talk about disparities pay between men and women, it's even more for military spouses because I've been asked in interviews, A, how are you going to take care of your kids while doing this job? So I've been asked as a woman that question. I've also
Mm,
been asked as in an interview, how are you going to do this job if your husband deploys?
mm.
And so there's this perception of hiring military spouses that they won't stay very long because they're going to relocate, or how are they going to do this job where their spouse deploys? So it's hard because I'm very proud to be a military spouse, but I also don't talk. I'm also very reserved if I'm going to go in an interview in that particular situation because of the perceptions and beliefs that they may have going into it. And it's one of the reasons why military spouses are vastly underpaid for the experience that they have. 80% of military spouses have college degrees, and yet they are paid like 60 cents to the dollar.
We just did a video of a guy who was talking about his experience in the military and then leaving the military,
Mhm.
and it was eye opening from a healthcare perspective. How he was a corpsman in the Navy, and he's like, couldn't get a job as a nurse leaving,
Mhm.
and so it was like he goes into the institutions that train nurses, and that they to get into nursing school, Sam just had this experience. You have to, have the grades. It's competitive, but when you're coming out of the military, you didn't follow that track. So, even though you had like practical experience, that was really, really interesting point. But Danielle is like, if you're a sales rep and you go sell instrumentation to a surgeon or
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
you can be in surgery, right, for and actually be there with the doctors.
Mhm.
And so it's like, but you don't have that training necessarily. You're not a nurse, you're not, but you're giving some advice to
Mhm.
a physician who's given surgery. And I thought it was an interesting spin, but it really made me feel for the military. Like he's like, I was disappointed coming out, like, and I'm just sharing this because I thought it was an
Yeah.
interesting story. There's nothing to it. I just wanted to let you know that what this guy said. But he's like, yeah, I mean, he thought he'd be a PA, frankly, and he would get into PA school, but it was just a huge rude awakening. And he became an entrepreneur. It's a good story, right? He had a good ending, but like, I can't imagine how many people are out there in the military who are expecting to come out in the civilian world and be able to do stuff with what they've learned. And then, the rules are just kind of skewed, right? It's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and a lot of times too, it's kind of a lot of jobs are saying, "Oh, I want industry experience." And I know this was something that my husband dealt with. He's Black Hawk pilot in the military. And so when
Nice.
he was pursuing a role, because he's a reservist now, he was pursuing a role in project manager as a project management position. And people were saying, well, you don't have project management experience. And I had to talk through with him and say, you know what? Yes, you do. First off, he joined when he was 32 years old. He had an MBA. He had owned his own business before he joined the military. He had closed his business down. And as a Black Hawk pilot and as an officer in the military, he was responsible for relocating 200 soldiers from the US to Iraq. He is responsible for planning missions and executing missions. I mean, he's responsible for all the logistics. He's got the leadership experience. And so a lot of companies get so focused on industry experience versus really looking at what are the tangible skills and characteristics that you can teach industry. But to have somebody to come from a military background who is, they're trained to get things done on time at a certain expectation and to have that experience of logistics and project management, that was a hard transition as well.
Yeah. No, it's first of all, what a wonderful patriot to give that up to go into the military. I mean, you really got to want that. And I was a former police officer. I get the draw to the civil service, and I get the draw to want to give, but I didn't have anything to give up. I was 20, so it's like I didn't. but to get and have an MBA, that's quite a sacrifice. That's really awesome. I didn't know that. That's great.
You don't hear that often.
No,
Being
no,
age and going into the military.
Yeah. It was the
yeah,
last age that he could possibly join the military was 32.
right,
And
right.
the passion and the reason behind it was his father was an immigrant from Cuba, and his father came over when he was 11 years old on the Peter Pan flights from Cuba and lived in an orphanage for 2 years until his parents were able to come over. And really talk about given the American dream, he was able to get funding for college, and he ended up becoming a very prominent, respected general surgeon in California. And so my husband said, look at what this country has given my family, and he wanted to give back to the country.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Very
Yeah, I'm in Florida and I'm surrounded by,
Mhm.
Cubans and really close friends, as a matter of fact. And we talk a lot about it, frankly. And it's really interesting to hear their perspective and also the differences in the generations, first generation, second generation, third generation. And I think, there's so many there's so many challenges that we need to, as a country, be able to, help with. But, the ones I know are amazing. They make it on their own. They've had such great stories, and it's all I can do not to spend 3 hours talking about
Mhm.
the amazing ways that they got over and what they did
Mhm.
when they lived in Miami and how they created this community and all that stuff. It's really really cool stuff. So
Mhm.
congrats. But grit, I mean, you're surrounded by it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got that sort of all around you. That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing this. We really appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's
Absolutely.
very nice to meet you. I don't know if it's random, but yeah, when I admire people, I just kind of ask, right? Like we were talking about before.
Mm.
I've always done that. If I like an author, if I like somebody
Mhm.
that's, but your stuff, it grabbed me, and I just thought, hey, maybe she'll talk to us. And
Yeah.
how cool is it to have my daughter on to, experience this? So thank you very much.
No,
Yeah,
thank you. I appreciate it.
I
Yeah,
really
it's an
love your
honor.
mindset and your outlook on everything, and it's very interesting to see from my age. So yeah, it's very honorable. So I appreciate you coming on here.
Well, we get to learn a lot from your generation as well, too. As much as we talk about, teaching our younger generation, I believe there's a lot we can learn from the younger generation as well.
Hey, this is your host, Danny Mobley. Thanks for watching Humans of Healthcare. Please subscribe below for more great interviews.